Daniel Whitmore's car rolled to a stop at the edge of Seabrook, Maine, the coastal town where his family had deep roots. The salty sea breeze greeted him as he stepped out, and the distant sound of crashing waves set the tone for his visit. He adjusted his tie, surveying the picturesque yet rugged landscape. The lighthouse stood tall against the azure sky, a beacon of history and tradition. Daniel had recently inherited his family's estate and businesses, a responsibility that weighed heavily on him. His father's death had left a void, and now it was up to him to uphold the family legacy. Among the properties was the Seabrook Lighthouse, an iconic structure that had guided ships for over a century. To Daniel, it represented an opportunity, a chance to transform it into a profitable venture, possibly a luxury resort or a tourist attraction. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of seagulls as he made his way to the lighthouse. Evelyn Harper, the lighthouse keeper's daughter, was already there, attending to her duties. She was a striking figure with windswept hair, standing resolutely by the lighthouse, her presence as steadfast as the structure itself. "Mr. Whitmore," Evelyn greeted him with a nod, her tone polite but guarded. "I heard you wanted to discuss something important." "Yes, Miss Harper," Daniel replied, offering a businesslike smile. "I've been looking over the estate and noticed the lighthouse is in need of some restoration. I believe it has the potential to be much more than just a guiding light for ships." Evelyn's eyes narrowed slightly. "The lighthouse is an essential part of our community. It's not just a piece of property to be developed." Daniel remained unfazed. "I understand your sentiments, but I think we should consider its potential. I'd like to make an offer to buy it from your father." Evelyn's expression hardened. "My father would never agree to sell it. This lighthouse is our home, our heritage. It's been in our family for generations." Daniel sensed the conversation would not be easy. "I'm willing to offer a substantial sum, enough to ensure your family is well taken care of. Think about what that money could do for you." Evelyn stood firm, her voice unwavering. "It's not about the money, Mr. Whitmore. This lighthouse is a symbol of our history and our community. Selling it would be like selling a piece of ourselves." Daniel's initial confidence wavered as he realized the depth of Evelyn's commitment. He nodded curtly, understanding this would not be a simple transaction. "I see. I'll speak with your father directly." As he turned to leave, Evelyn called after him. "Please, Mr. Whitmore, consider what this lighthouse means to us. It's more than just bricks and mortar." Daniel paused, her words resonating more than he expected. He gave a brief nod before walking away, determined to convince her father but now understanding the emotional ties involved. Evelyn watched him go, her heart heavy with the fear of losing something so precious. She knew this was just the beginning of a challenging journey to protect her home and heritage. Daniel walked back to his car, his mind buzzing with thoughts of the conversation. The lighthouse was more significant than he had anticipated. He knew he had to strategize differently if he wanted to succeed. Later that evening, Daniel sat in his study, looking over plans and financial reports. He couldn't shake Evelyn's passionate words from his mind. It was rare for him to encounter someone so deeply committed to a cause. He made a few calls, arranging meetings with potential investors who might see the value in preserving the lighthouse while still turning a profit. The next day, Daniel decided to visit the town hall to gather more information about the lighthouse and its history. The town's records were extensive, detailing the lighthouse's construction, its significance during the war, and the Harper family's long-standing role as its keepers. The more he read, the more he understood why Evelyn was so determined to protect it. At the same time, Evelyn returned home to find her father resting in his favorite chair, looking out at the ocean through the large window that framed the room. "Father, Daniel Whitmore came by today," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Edward Harper turned to her, his eyes filled with a mix of curiosity and concern. "What did you want, Evelyn?" "He wants to buy the lighthouse," she replied, her voice barely containing her frustration. "He thinks it could be developed into something profitable." Edward sighed deeply, his frail hands gripping the arms of his chair. "This lighthouse has been our family's duty and pride for generations. It's not just a building, it's a beacon of our history and a pillar of this community. Evelyn knelt beside him, taking his hand in hers. I know, Father. I told him we wouldn't sell. But he's persistent. We need to be prepared for a fight. Edward nodded, a determined glint in his eyes. We will protect it, Evelyn. Together. Determined to shield the lighthouse from any threat, Evelyn spent the next few days rallying the community. She spoke at town meetings, organized gatherings, and shared stories of the lighthouse's significance. The townspeople, many of whom had family histories intertwined with the lighthouse, rallied behind her cause. Meanwhile, Daniel's research led him to unexpected discoveries. He found old newspaper clippings and photographs that depicted the lighthouse as not just a navigational aid but as a symbol of hope and resilience for Seabrook. He realized that any attempt to alter its purpose would face immense resistance. Despite their opposing views, Daniel couldn't help but admire Evelyn's tenacity. He decided to approach the situation differently. Instead of pushing for a purchase, he would find a way to incorporate the lighthouse's history into his plans. He believed there had to be a way to benefit both the community and his business goals. As the sun set over Seabrook, casting a golden glow over the lighthouse, Daniel found himself standing at its base once more. He looked up at the towering structure, feeling a mix of determination and respect. He knew he had a difficult task ahead, but he was prepared for the challenge. The lighthouse keeper's daughter had ignited something within him, a desire to honor the past while forging a new path for the future. Evelyn Harper returned to the lighthouse, her mind swirling with thoughts about Daniel Whitmore's proposition. She had known he would be arriving in Seabrook, but she hadn't expected his intentions to be so disruptive. The lighthouse was more than just a job for her, it was a legacy, a symbol of her family's dedication to the community. Her father, Edward Harper, had been the lighthouse keeper for over 4 decades. Now in his 60s, his health was declining, and Evelyn had taken over many of his responsibilities. She found him resting in his favorite chair, looking out at the ocean through the large window that framed the room. Father, Daniel Whitmore came by today, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Edward turned to her, his eyes filled with a mix of curiosity and concern. What did he want, Evelyn? He wants to buy the lighthouse, she replied, her voice barely containing her frustration. He thinks it could be developed into something profitable. Edward sighed deeply, his frail hands gripping the arms of his chair. This lighthouse has been our family's duty and pride for generations. It's not just a building, it's a beacon of our history and a pillar of this community. Evelyn knelt beside him, taking his hand in hers. I know, Father. I told him we wouldn't sell. But he's persistent. We need to be prepared for a fight. Edward nodded, a determined glint in his eyes. We will protect it, Evelyn. Together. The next morning, Evelyn decided to confront Daniel directly. She found him at the local diner, reviewing some documents over a cup of coffee. The sight of him, so polished and out of place in the rustic setting, sparked a mix of irritation and curiosity within her. Mr. Whitmore, she greeted, standing at the edge of his table. Daniel looked up, somewhat surprised but composed. Miss Harper. Please, join me. Evelyn sat down, her posture rigid. I wanted to make something clear. The lighthouse isn't for sale. Not now, not ever. My father and I are committed to preserving it. Daniel leaned back, his gaze steady. I respect your dedication, Miss Harper, but you must understand, I see potential in this place. Potential that could benefit the entire town. Evelyn shook her head. What you see as potential, I see as destruction. This lighthouse is a testament to our history, not a commodity to be exploited. Daniel remained silent for a moment, considering her words. Perhaps I've approached this the wrong way. Maybe if you saw my plans, you'd understand my vision. I don't need to see your plans, Evelyn replied firmly. I know what's at stake, and I won't let anyone take that away from us. Daniel nodded slowly, acknowledging her resolve. Very well. But my offer stands. If you ever reconsider, you know where to find me. Evelyn stood up, feeling a mixture of triumph and frustration. "Good day, Mr. Whitmore." As she walked out of the diner, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a long battle. Daniel Whitmore was not a man who gave up easily, and she knew she had to be vigilant to protect the Lighthouse and what it stood for. Back at the Lighthouse, Evelyn decided to organize a community meeting. She knew that if she could rally the townspeople, they could present a united front against any attempts to commercialize the Lighthouse. She spread the word through flyers and personal invitations, hoping to gather as many supporters as possible. The meeting was held in the town hall, a modest but welcoming building that had seen many community gatherings over the years. As people filled the room, Evelyn felt a surge of hope. She saw familiar faces, fishermen, shopkeepers, families who had lived in Seabrook for generations, all there to support her cause. Evelyn stood at the front of the room, her heart pounding with a mixture of nerves and determination. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "As many of you know, Daniel Whitmore has expressed interest in purchasing our lighthouse. He sees it as an opportunity for development, but we know it as a vital part of our heritage and community." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Evelyn continued, "We cannot allow this symbol of our history to be turned into a mere commodity. We must stand together to protect it." The meeting was filled with passionate discussions. Some townspeople were wary of opposing a wealthy businessman like Daniel, fearing repercussions. Others were wholeheartedly in support of Evelyn's mission. They shared stories of the lighthouse's significance, how it had guided their ancestors, how it had been a place of hope during storms and dark times. Meanwhile, Daniel was not idle. He continued his research, trying to find a way to incorporate the lighthouse's history into a profitable plan. He visited the town's historical society, poring over old documents and photographs. The more he learned, the more he realized the depth of the community's connection to the lighthouse. He also observed Evelyn's efforts from a distance. Her dedication and the community's response made him question his initial approach. Daniel knew he needed a different strategy, one that respected the lighthouse's legacy while also achieving his business goals. One evening, Daniel found himself standing at the base of the lighthouse again, the setting sun casting a golden glow over the structure. He watched as Evelyn meticulously attended to her duties, her every action reflecting her commitment. A sense of admiration grew within him. As the days passed, Evelyn and Daniel's paths crossed more frequently. They were civil but wary of each other, each standing firm in their beliefs. Evelyn continued to organize community efforts to protect the lighthouse, while Daniel sought a balanced solution that could satisfy both his business interests and the community's values. Despite their opposing views, a mutual respect began to form. They saw each other's dedication and began to understand the motivations behind their actions. Evelyn realized that Daniel was not merely a profit-driven businessman, but someone who could potentially be an ally in preserving the lighthouse's legacy. Evelyn Harper woke up early the next morning, the weight of her responsibilities heavy on her shoulders. She had spent the previous evening rallying the community and planning further actions to protect the lighthouse. Her father's health was a constant worry, and she knew she had to stay strong for both of them. She made her way to the kitchen, where the smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the air. Her father was already seated at the table, reading the morning newspaper. He looked up and gave her a warm smile. "Good morning, Evelyn," he greeted. "How are you feeling today?" Evelyn poured herself a cup of coffee and sat down across from him. "Determined," she replied. "I won't let anyone take the lighthouse away from us." Edward nodded approvingly. "That's my girl. We'll fight this together." After breakfast, Evelyn set out to continue her work. She decided to visit the town's historical society to gather more information that could strengthen their case. As she walked through the quaint streets of Seabrook, she was greeted by familiar faces, all showing their support. Meanwhile, Daniel Whitmore was in his temporary office, reviewing documents and considering his next move. He had been impressed by Evelyn's passion and the community's dedication to the lighthouse. Despite his initial intentions, he found himself wanting to find a solution that could benefit everyone. To test Evelyn's integrity, Daniel decided to leave a significant sum of money in a place where she could easily find it. He wanted to see if she was truly as principled as she seemed. He placed the money in a drawer in the Lighthouse office, where Evelyn often worked. Later that day, Evelyn returned to the Lighthouse. She busied herself with her usual tasks, checking the light and ensuring everything was in order. As she organized the office, she opened the drawer and found the money. Surprised, she picked it up and examined it. It was a substantial amount, enough to make anyone think twice. Evelyn's first instinct was to put the money back, but curiosity got the better of her. She wondered why the money was there and who it belonged to. She decided to confront Daniel about it, suspecting he might be testing her. She found Daniel at the local diner, once again engrossed in his work. She approached his table with the envelope in hand. "Mr. Whitmore, I believe this belongs to you," she said, placing the envelope on the table. Daniel looked up, his expression unreadable. "Miss Harper, please sit down." Evelyn complied, her eyes fixed on him. "Why did you leave this money in the Lighthouse office?" Daniel leaned back, studying her carefully. "I wanted to see how you would react. To test your integrity." Evelyn's face flushed with anger. "You think I'm here for the money? This lighthouse means everything to me and my family. We don't need your tests or your money." Daniel raised his hands in a placating gesture. "I apologize if I offended you. I needed to be sure. And you've proven your integrity." Evelyn's anger subsided slightly, but her resolve remained firm. "The lighthouse is not for sale, Mr. Whitmore." "Not now, not ever." Daniel nodded. "I understand. But I'm not giving up. I believe there's a way to preserve the lighthouse and benefit the community." Evelyn looked at him skeptically. "I hope you mean that, Mr. Whitmore. Because if you're serious about preserving the lighthouse, you'll have my support." With that, Evelyn stood up and left the diner, the envelope of money still on the table. Daniel watched her go, feeling a mix of admiration and frustration. He realized that earning Evelyn's trust and finding a solution that honored the lighthouse's legacy would be more challenging than he had anticipated. Back at the lighthouse, Evelyn resumed her duties, her thoughts occupied by the day's events. She felt a sense of vindication for standing her ground, but she also knew the battle was far from over. She needed to stay vigilant and continue rallying the community to ensure the lighthouse remained in their hands. As the days turned into weeks, Evelyn and Daniel found themselves in an uneasy alliance. They began working together on small restoration projects, with Daniel funding the materials and labor while Evelyn oversaw the work. Despite their initial distrust, a sense of mutual respect started to develop. Evelyn noticed that Daniel was not the cold, profit-driven businessman she had assumed him to be. He showed a genuine interest in the lighthouse's history and the community's well-being. He attended town meetings, listened to the townspeople's concerns, and even participated in local events. One evening, as they worked side by side repairing a section of the lighthouse, Daniel spoke up. "Miss Harper, I've been thinking. What if we found a way to incorporate the lighthouse's history into a plan that benefits both the community and my business goals?" Evelyn paused, considering his words. "What do you have in mind?" "I'm not sure yet," Daniel admitted. "But I believe there's a solution that honors the past while looking to the future. Something that preserves the lighthouse's legacy and helps Seabrook thrive." Evelyn studied him for a moment, seeing sincerity in his eyes. "If you're serious about that, Mr. Whitmore, I'm willing to listen. But the lighthouse's preservation must always come first." Daniel nodded, a determined look on his face. "Agreed." As they continued their work, Evelyn couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. Perhaps there was a way to protect the lighthouse while embracing a future that benefited everyone. And maybe, just maybe, she could trust Daniel Whitmore to help her achieve that goal. The weather forecast predicted a severe storm, the likes of which Seabrook hadn't seen in years. The townspeople busied themselves with preparations, boarding up windows, securing boats, and ensuring their homes were as stormproof as possible. Evelyn Harper stood at the base of the lighthouse, her mind racing with worries. The lighthouse had weathered many storms, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this one would test its resilience like never before. Evelyn's father, Edward, had been increasingly frail, and the thought of facing the storm without his steady presence was daunting. She made her way inside to find him resting in his chair, a blanket draped over his legs. "Father, the storm is coming," she said gently, placing a hand on his shoulder. Edward looked up, his eyes clouded with concern. "I know, Evelyn. The lighthouse will stand firm, as it always has. But you must be careful." "I will, Father," she assured him. "I've already secured everything inside. I'll check the light and make sure it's ready." As she climbed the spiral staircase to the top of the lighthouse, Evelyn couldn't help but think of Daniel Whitmore. Despite their differences, he had shown a genuine interest in preserving the lighthouse. She hoped he was safe and that he had heeded the warnings about the storm. At that moment, Daniel was in his temporary office, coordinating last-minute preparations for his properties. He glanced out the window, the dark clouds looming ominously on the horizon. His thoughts drifted to Evelyn and the lighthouse. He knew how important it was to her and the community. He decided to check on her before the storm hit. Daniel arrived at the lighthouse just as the first raindrops began to fall. He found Evelyn at the top, adjusting the light. "Miss Harper," he called out, his voice barely audible over the rising wind. Evelyn turned, surprised to see him. "Mr. Whitmore, what are you doing here?" "I wanted to make sure you were prepared for the storm," he replied, concern evident in his eyes. "This is going to be a rough one." Evelyn nodded. "I've done everything I can. But the lighthouse will need constant attention throughout the storm." "I'll stay and help," Daniel offered without hesitation. Evelyn hesitated, then nodded. "All right. Let's get to work." As the storm intensified, Daniel and Evelyn worked tirelessly to ensure the lighthouse remained operational. The wind howled, and waves crashed against the rocky shore with ferocious force. Inside, they checked the equipment, secured loose items, and monitored the light to ensure it continued to guide any ships caught in the storm. Hours passed, and the storm showed no signs of relenting. Exhausted but determined, Evelyn and Daniel took turns resting and keeping watch. During a brief lull, they found themselves in the small kitchen, sipping hot tea and catching their breath. "Why did you come back?" Evelyn asked, curiosity getting the better of her. Daniel looked at her, his expression earnest. "I've come to realize how much this lighthouse means to you and the community. It's more than just a building, it's a symbol of hope and resilience. I wanted to be here to help protect it." Evelyn nodded, feeling a sense of connection she hadn't expected. "Thank you, Daniel. It means a lot that you're here." As the night wore on, the storm reached its peak. The lighthouse swayed slightly under the relentless assault of wind and rain, but it stood firm. Daniel and Evelyn continued their vigil, their mutual respect growing with each passing hour. In the early hours of the morning, the storm finally began to subside. The wind died down, and the rain lessened to a steady drizzle. Exhausted but relieved, Daniel and Evelyn made their way to the top of the lighthouse one last time to check the light. It was still shining brightly, a beacon of hope in the dark, stormy night. As they stood together, looking out at the now calm sea, Daniel spoke softly. "We did it, Evelyn. The lighthouse made it through the storm." Evelyn smiled, a mixture of relief and pride evident on her face. "Yes, we did. Thank you for your help, Daniel. I couldn't have done it without you." Daniel turned to her, his eyes filled with respect and admiration. "I'm glad I could be here. This lighthouse is important to me too, now. And so is preserving its legacy." Evelyn felt a warmth spread through her at his words. She knew there was still much work to be done to ensure the lighthouse's future, but for the first time, she felt a genuine partnership with Daniel. Together, they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the sun began to rise, casting a golden glow over the calm waters, Evelyn and Daniel descended the staircase, ready to face the new day and whatever it might bring. The storm had tested their resolve and their partnership, and they had emerged stronger for it. The lighthouse had stood firm, and so had they. In the aftermath of the storm, Seabrook slowly returned to normal. The townspeople emerged from their homes, assessing the damage and beginning the process of rebuilding. The lighthouse stood tall and unwavering, a testament to the resilience of the community and the dedication of those who had worked to protect it. Evelyn Harper and Daniel Whitmore had formed an unexpected bond during the storm. Their shared effort had built a foundation of trust and mutual respect. However, both knew that the fight to preserve the lighthouse was far from over. A few days after the storm, a new threat emerged. A major developer arrived in Seabrook with a lucrative offer to buy the lighthouse and the surrounding land. The developer, Mr. Thomas Grayson, was known for transforming historic sites into profitable commercial ventures. His arrival sparked a heated debate among the townspeople. At a hastily organized town meeting, the community gathered to discuss the offer. The room buzzed with tension and uncertainty. Evelyn stood at the front, ready to defend the lighthouse once more. Daniel stood beside her, a reassuring presence. Mr. Grayson took the floor, presenting his vision for the lighthouse. Ladies and gentlemen, I see tremendous potential here. We can transform the lighthouse into a luxury resort, bringing jobs and prosperity to Seabrook. This project will benefit everyone. A murmur of excitement and concern rippled through the crowd. Some saw the offer as an opportunity for economic growth, while others feared it would destroy the town's heritage. Evelyn stepped forward, her voice clear and determined. Mr. Grayson, while your offer may seem enticing, it would strip away the very soul of Seabrook. The lighthouse is not just a building, it's a symbol of our history and our community. We cannot sacrifice our heritage for short-term gain. The room erupted in applause and murmurs of agreement. However, a few voices of dissent could be heard. One of the townspeople, Mr. Collins, stood up. Evelyn, we need to think about the future. This project could bring much-needed revenue and jobs. We can't hold on to the past forever. Evelyn met his gaze with unwavering resolve. I understand the need for progress, Mr. Collins, but not at the cost of our identity. We can find ways to grow and thrive without erasing our history. Daniel stepped forward, addressing the crowd. Evelyn is right. We can find a balance that respects our past while building a prosperous future. I believe there's a way to preserve the lighthouse and bring economic benefits to Seabrook. Mr. Grayson raised an eyebrow, intrigued. And what do you propose, Mr. Whitmore? Daniel took a deep breath. I propose a partnership. We can restore the lighthouse and develop the surrounding area in a way that honors its history. We can create a heritage center, a museum, and small businesses that benefit the community without compromising its integrity. The room fell silent as the townspeople considered his words. Evelyn looked at Daniel, a spark of hope in her eyes. Mr. Grayson seemed skeptical. That sounds noble, Mr. Whitmore, but will it be profitable? Daniel nodded. I believe it can be. By attracting tourists and visitors interested in history and culture, we can generate revenue. It might not be as immediately lucrative as a luxury resort, but it will sustain the community in the long run. The meeting continued with intense discussions. Some townspeople voiced their support for Daniel's proposal, while others remained uncertain. The debate highlighted the division within the community. As the meeting drew to a close, the townspeople agreed to take a vote in the coming days. Evelyn and Daniel left the town hall, the weight of the decision heavy on their shoulders. Outside, Evelyn turned to Daniel. Do you really think we can convince them? Daniel met her gaze, his expression resolute. I do. It won't be easy, but if we stand together and present a united front, we can show them that preserving the lighthouse is the best choice for Seabrook. Evelyn smiled, a sense of determination rising within her. Thank you, Daniel. I couldn't do this without you. Daniel placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We're in this together, Evelyn. For the lighthouse and for Seabrook. The days leading up to the vote were filled with activity. Evelyn and Daniel worked tirelessly to gather support for their proposal. They met with townspeople, shared their vision, and emphasized the importance of preserving the lighthouse's legacy. On the day of the vote, the town hall was filled to capacity. The tension was palpable as the townspeople cast their ballots. Evelyn and Daniel waited anxiously, knowing that the future of the lighthouse hung in the balance. When the votes were finally counted, the results were announced. The community had chosen to support Daniel and Evelyn's proposal, opting for a future that honored their past while embracing progress. The room erupted in cheers and applause. Evelyn felt tears of relief and joy welling up in her eyes. She turned to Daniel, who smiled and gave her a nod of reassurance. As they stood together, surrounded by their community, Evelyn knew that the fight to preserve the lighthouse had only just begun. But with Daniel by her side, she felt confident that they could protect Seabrook's heritage and build a future that respected its history. The days following the vote were filled with a renewed sense of purpose in Seabrook. The community rallied behind Evelyn and Daniel's vision, eager to see the lighthouse restored and the surrounding area developed in a way that honored their heritage. Daniel immersed himself in planning, working closely with local historians and architects to ensure the project stayed true to its roots. One afternoon, as Daniel was reviewing some historical documents at the town's historical society, he stumbled upon an old journal. The leather-bound book was worn, its pages yellowed with age. Intrigued, he carefully opened it and began to read. The journal belonged to his great-grandfather, Richard Whitmore, who had been a prominent figure in Seabrook's history. As Daniel read through the entries, he discovered something remarkable. His great-grandfather had been instrumental in the construction of the lighthouse, driven by a desire to protect the town and its people. The journal detailed the challenges faced during the building process and the deep connection Richard had felt to the lighthouse and the community. One entry stood out: "The lighthouse is more than a structure, it is a symbol of hope and resilience. It must stand as a testament to our perseverance and unity." Daniel felt a surge of emotion as he realized the depth of his family's connection to the lighthouse. He had always known about the Whitmore legacy, but reading his great-grandfather's words made it personal. The lighthouse wasn't just a piece of history, it was part of his heritage, a legacy he was now determined to protect. Determined to share this revelation, Daniel made his way to the lighthouse. He found Evelyn working in the garden, her hands covered in soil as she tended to the flowers that surrounded the base of the structure. She looked up as he approached, wiping her hands on her apron. "Daniel, you look like you've seen a ghost," she remarked, noticing his intense expression. "I found something," Daniel replied, holding up the journal. "My great-grandfather's journal. He was deeply involved in the construction of the lighthouse. It was his passion, just as it is yours." Evelyn's eyes widened in surprise. "I had no idea. What does it say?" Daniel handed her the journal. "Read it for yourself. It's clear that the lighthouse was more than just a project for him. It was a symbol of hope and resilience for the community. He wanted it to stand as a testament to our perseverance." Evelyn carefully took the journal, her fingers tracing the worn leather cover. She began to read, her eyes scanning the faded pages. As she read Richard Whitmore's words, a sense of connection and understanding washed over her. She looked up at Daniel, her expression softening. "Your great-grandfather's words are powerful," she said quietly. "It seems we both have a deep connection to this lighthouse." Daniel nodded. "It's our shared legacy, Evelyn. And it's worth protecting." Evelyn closed the journal, a sense of determination settling over her. "We need to incorporate this history into our plans. It will show the community how important the lighthouse is, not just to us, but to everyone." Together, they worked on revising their proposal, incorporating the historical significance and the vision of Richard Whitmore. They planned to create a heritage center that would tell the story of the lighthouse, the town, and the people who had built it. The center would include a museum, educational programs, and a space for community events. As they presented their updated plans to the town council, the response was overwhelmingly positive. The council members were moved by the historical connection and the thoughtful approach to preserving the lighthouse's legacy while fostering community growth. But the path was not without obstacles. Mr. Grayson, the developer, was still interested in the project, though he now faced significant opposition from the community. He approached Daniel with a new offer, one that promised even greater financial benefits but required compromising some of their preservation plans. Daniel was torn. The offer was tempting, and it could provide immediate funds for the project. However, it went against everything he and Evelyn had fought for. He knew he had to make a decision that would define the future of the lighthouse and his legacy. That evening, Daniel and Evelyn sat on the steps of the lighthouse, watching the sun set over the ocean. The sky was painted in hues of orange and pink, casting a warm glow over the water. Grayson made another offer, Daniel said quietly. It's more lucrative, but it requires sacrificing some of our preservation plans. Evelyn looked at him, her eyes filled with concern. What do you think we should do? Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. I've been thinking a lot about my great-grandfather's words. He believed in the importance of the lighthouse as a symbol of hope and resilience. I can't betray that legacy for money. Evelyn placed a hand on his arm, her touch reassuring. Then we don't accept the offer. We stay true to our vision and our values. The community is behind us, and together, we can make this work. Daniel nodded, feeling a sense of clarity and purpose. You're right. We'll stick to our plan and find a way to make it work. The following day, Daniel informed Mr. Grayson of their decision. He emphasized their commitment to preserving the lighthouse's history and the importance of community support. Grayson, though disappointed, respected their decision and withdrew his offer. With renewed determination, Daniel and Evelyn continued their work. They organized fundraising events, sought grants, and rallied the community to support their vision. Slowly but surely, the project began to take shape. The lighthouse was restored, the Heritage Center was built, and the surrounding area was developed into a thriving community space. The journey had been challenging, but it had brought the community closer together. Evelyn and Daniel had not only preserved the lighthouse but had also created a lasting legacy that honored the past while embracing the future. The anticipation in Seabrook was palpable as the day of the town meeting approached. The community had worked tirelessly alongside Evelyn and Daniel, and now it was time to present their updated proposal formally. The town hall was packed with townspeople eager to hear the final plans and cast their votes. Evelyn stood at the front of the room, feeling a mixture of nerves and excitement. She glanced at Daniel, who gave her a reassuring nod. They had rehearsed their presentation countless times, but the stakes felt higher now that the moment was upon them. Mayor Thompson called the meeting to order. Thank you all for coming today. We're here to discuss the future of our beloved lighthouse and to hear the proposal put forth by Miss Harper and Mr. Whitmore. Daniel stepped forward first, holding the journal that had belonged to his great-grandfather. Many of you know that my family has deep roots in Seabrook. What you might not know is that my great-grandfather, Richard Whitmore, played a significant role in the construction of the lighthouse. This journal contains his thoughts and experiences during that time. He opened the journal to a marked page and read aloud, "The lighthouse is more than a structure, it is a symbol of hope and resilience. It must stand as a testament to our perseverance and unity." The room was silent, every eye on Daniel as he continued. This lighthouse has stood as a beacon of hope for generations. Evelyn and I believe that we can honor its legacy while also ensuring a prosperous future for Seabrook. Evelyn joined him, taking a deep breath before addressing the crowd. We propose to restore the lighthouse and develop a heritage center that tells the story of our town, our ancestors, and the lighthouse itself. The center will include a museum, educational programs, and space for community events. We believe this project will not only preserve our history but also attract visitors and stimulate our local economy. The presentation continued with detailed plans and projected benefits. Evelyn and Daniel had prepared meticulously, and their passion for the project shone through. As they concluded, the room erupted in applause, a testament to the hard work they had put in. Mayor Thompson opened the floor for questions and comments. Mr. Collins, who had previously voiced his support for the developer's offer, stood up. I was skeptical at first, but after hearing your proposal and seeing the community come together, I'm convinced this is the right path for Seabrook. I support the project. Other townspeople followed suit, expressing their approval and admiration for Evelyn and Daniel's dedication. The few remaining skeptics were swayed by the overwhelming support from their neighbors. Finally, it was time for the vote. The tension in the room was palpable as ballots were cast and collected. Evelyn and Daniel stood side by side, their hands clasped tightly together, waiting for the results. When Mayor Thompson announced the outcome, the room erupted in cheers and applause. The proposal had been approved by an overwhelming majority. Evelyn felt tears of joy and relief welling up in her eyes. She turned to Daniel, who pulled her into a tight embrace. "We did it," he whispered, his voice filled with emotion. "We really did it." Evelyn nodded, unable to speak as the reality of their victory sank in. They had not only saved the lighthouse, but had also united the community in a shared vision for the future. Over the following weeks and months, the project moved forward at an impressive pace. The restoration of the lighthouse began, with craftsmen and volunteers working tirelessly to bring it back to its former glory. The Heritage Center started to take shape, and the community rallied together to support the effort in any way they could. One evening, as the sun set over the ocean, casting a warm glow over the construction site, Evelyn and Daniel stood together, watching the progress. "I've never felt prouder of Seabrook," Evelyn said softly. "Or more hopeful for our future." Daniel nodded, his eyes fixed on the lighthouse. "We've created something truly special here. And it's just the beginning." As the Heritage Center neared completion, a grand opening celebration was planned. The entire town was invited to attend, and the event promised to be a day of joy and reflection. On the morning of the celebration, the lighthouse stood tall, its freshly painted exterior gleaming in the sunlight. The Heritage Center, a beautiful blend of old and new architecture, was ready to welcome visitors. Exhibits had been carefully curated to tell the story of Seabrook, its people, and the lighthouse that had guided them through countless storms. Evelyn and Daniel greeted guests as they arrived, their hearts full of pride and gratitude. The mayor gave a heartfelt speech, praising the community's resilience and the tireless efforts of Evelyn and Daniel. As the ribbon was cut, signaling the official opening of the Heritage Center, the crowd erupted in applause. Evelyn felt a surge of emotion as she looked around at the faces of her friends and neighbors. They had done this together, and it was a testament to their strength and unity. Throughout the day, visitors explored the exhibits, shared stories, and celebrated their shared history. Evelyn and Daniel moved through the crowd, thanking everyone for their support and hard work. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the lighthouse and Heritage Center, Evelyn and Daniel found a quiet moment to reflect. They stood at the edge of the water, the waves gently lapping at the shore. "We've come a long way," Evelyn said, her voice filled with emotion. Daniel nodded, taking her hand in his. "And we have a bright future ahead. Together." As they watched the lighthouse's light begin to shine, guiding ships safely to shore, they knew they had created something lasting and meaningful. Seabrook's heritage had been preserved, and its future was filled with promise. The grand opening of the Heritage Center was a turning point for Seabrook. The community had come together to celebrate their shared history and the preservation of their beloved lighthouse. The months of hard work had paid off, and the town was buzzing with excitement and pride. Evelyn Harper and Daniel Whitmore stood side by side, watching as the townspeople explored the new exhibits and shared stories about their ancestors. The Heritage Center was more than just a building, it was a testament to the strength and resilience of Seabrook. As the festivities continued, Evelyn felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned to see her father, Edward Harper, smiling proudly. Despite his frail health, he had insisted on being present for this momentous occasion. "Father, I'm so glad you're here," Evelyn said, hugging him gently. Edward's eyes sparkled with pride. "You've done a wonderful job, Evelyn. Your mother would be so proud of you." Evelyn felt a lump in her throat as she thought of her mother, who had passed away years ago. She knew that her mother's spirit was with them, watching over the lighthouse and their family. Daniel joined them, his expression warm and appreciative. "Mr. Harper, it's an honor to have you here. Your family's legacy is truly remarkable." Edward nodded, his gaze fixed on the lighthouse. "Thank you, Daniel. You've shown great dedication and respect for our history. I'm grateful for your support." As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the Lighthouse and Heritage Center, the townspeople gathered for the final event of the day, a bonfire on the beach. The crackling flames and the sound of waves created a perfect backdrop for the evening's celebrations. Evelyn and Daniel sat by the fire, surrounded by friends and family. The warmth of the flames mirrored the warmth in their hearts as they reflected on their journey. "You know," Daniel said, his voice thoughtful, "this project has changed me. I came here with one idea, but I'm leaving with something much more valuable, a sense of community and a deep appreciation for history." Evelyn smiled, squeezing his hand. "You've become an important part of Seabrook, Daniel. And I'm grateful for everything you've done." Daniel looked into her eyes, his expression sincere. "I couldn't have done it without you, Evelyn. You've taught me the true meaning of resilience and dedication." As they watched the fire dance and the stars begin to twinkle above, they knew that their journey was far from over. The Lighthouse and Heritage Center were just the beginning of a new chapter for Seabrook. There were still challenges to face and opportunities to explore, but they were ready to face them together. In the weeks that followed, the Heritage Center became a hub of activity. Tourists and historians flocked to Seabrook to learn about its rich history and explore the beautifully restored lighthouse. Local businesses thrived, benefiting from the increased visitors, and the community continued to grow stronger. Evelyn and Daniel worked tirelessly to ensure that the Heritage Center fulfilled its mission of preserving the past while fostering a sense of unity and progress. They organized educational programs, hosted community events, and continued to share the stories of Seabrook's history. One evening, as they walked along the beach, Evelyn turned to Daniel, her eyes filled with hope. "I've been thinking about the future, about what more we can do for Seabrook." Daniel nodded, his mind already racing with ideas. "I've been thinking the same. There's so much potential here, so many ways we can continue to honor the past and build a brighter future." Evelyn smiled, feeling a sense of excitement and purpose. "Together, we can make Seabrook even better. We've proven that when we work together, we can achieve great things." As they stood by the water, watching the lighthouse's beam sweep across the night sky, they felt a sense of peace and fulfillment. They had faced storms and challenges, but they had emerged stronger and more united than ever. Evelyn and Daniel knew that their journey was just beginning. With the support of their community and the legacy of their ancestors guiding them, they were ready to embrace whatever the future held. Seabrook's heritage had been preserved, and its future was bright with promise. As the waves gently lapped at the shore and the lighthouse stood tall, a beacon of hope and resilience, Evelyn and Daniel knew that they had found something truly special, a sense of purpose, a deep connection to the past, and a partnership that would carry them into the future. And so, with hearts full of gratitude and eyes set on the horizon, they walked hand in hand, ready to face whatever lay ahead, knowing that together, they could light the way for generations to come. A year had passed since the grand opening of the Heritage Center. Seabrook had flourished, with the Lighthouse and Heritage Center becoming a beloved landmark for both locals and visitors. The community had grown stronger, united by a shared sense of pride and history. Evelyn and Daniel stood at the top of the lighthouse, looking out over the town they had worked so hard to protect. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the water and the bustling streets below. "We've come a long way," Evelyn said softly, her eyes reflecting the beauty of the scene before them. Daniel nodded, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "And there's still so much more to do. But I wouldn't want to do it with anyone else." Evelyn smiled, leaning into him. "Together, we've built something lasting. Something that will stand the test of time." As the lighthouse's beam swept across the night sky, guiding ships safely to shore, Evelyn and Daniel knew that they had created a legacy that would endure for generations. They had faced challenges and overcome obstacles, but through it all, they had remained steadfast in their commitment to preserving the past and building a brighter future. Seabrook was their home, and they were its guardians, ready to light the way for all who followed in their footsteps. And as they stood together, hand in hand, they knew that the journey was just beginning.